Indigenous rights and sustainable agriculture practices are two important concepts that have become increasingly relevant in our modern world. Indigenous rights are the collective rights of indigenous peoples, which are the rights they hold as a distinct group of people with a shared culture, history, and language. These rights include the right to self-determination, the right to traditional lands, the right to cultural expression, and the right to free, prior and informed consent. Sustainable agriculture practices are farming techniques that are designed to minimize environmental impacts while maintaining long-term economic and social benefits. These practices include conservation tillage, integrated pest management, cover cropping, and organic and regenerative farming. Indigenous rights are an integral part of sustainable agriculture practices. Indigenous peoples have a long history of managing their lands sustainably, using ecological knowledge and traditional farming practices that are now being recognized as essential to combating climate change, conserving biodiversity, and protecting agroecosystems. Indigenous peoples have the right to maintain their traditional lands and the right to practice their traditional knowledge and cultural expressions. This means that they have the right to decide what kind of sustainable agriculture practices will be used on their lands and who will practice them. Indigenous peoples have a particularly unique relationship with the land and recognize it as an integral part of their culture and identity. This relationship is reflected in the way they manage their lands, often using practices such as crop rotation, agroforestry, and traditional hunting and fishing. These practices have been proven to be essential to promoting healthy ecosystems and protecting biodiversity. Unfortunately, indigenous peoples often face obstacles to practicing their traditional knowledge and maintaining their traditional lands, such as colonization, displacement, and resource extraction. In order to ensure that sustainable agriculture practices are accessible to all, it is essential to uphold indigenous rights. This includes recognizing the rights of indigenous communities to maintain their traditional lands, practice their traditional knowledge, and freely express their culture. It also means respecting their right to free, prior and informed consent when decisions are being made that affect their lands and livelihoods. By supporting indigenous rights, we can ensure that sustainable agriculture practices are available to everyone, and not just those with access to resources. Indigenous rights and sustainable agriculture practices are essential components of a healthy and just global food system. By upholding indigenous rights and supporting sustainable agriculture practices, we can ensure that the rights and livelihoods of indigenous peoples are protected and that our food system is equitable and sustainable.